Bitcoin is trading just under $103,000 after making almost a new all-time high attempt in the overnight session. But as we'll be going over today's video, there is a major signal going on in the background, which I think is the one that I've been waiting for quite some time, and it has major implications for price action over these next few weeks. So I'll start it off actually on that note and reveal the big signal, and that, of course, is the hash ribbons capitulation signal over here. This is the same signal that we've been monitoring from cycle to cycle, especially very intensely during these past couple cycles, to give us areas of indication where we should be perhaps maybe a little bit more bullish and more aggressive versus areas that we should be a little bit more perhaps conservative and cautious. For example, the last time that we saw a capitulation signal similar to the one that we saw just recently right here from last week was actually preceding this last major dump off that we saw from, of course, the current all-time high on Bitcoin from late January. And of course, this one led, all the way down here before you got the buy signal. And of course, we have several other instances of this. Even last year during May, we did get that first capitulation signal, boom, comes down. Took a few months, to be fair, before that buy signal did happen. And even then it dumped below there. But ultimately, this was a phenomenal area. But again, that capitulation signal was a major cause for, not being aggressive if you're a more long-term investor, which I'm starting to, angle this content maybe a little bit more towards. Same thing over here, preceded this nice little dump-ola. It doesn't look like much on this chart, but it was about 20%. This one over here completely failed, but again, that buy signal that followed after was the big signal for the risk on. And you can see all these signals of pass. It's not perfect, of course. We do have instances where this does fire off the capitulation signal and price just goes up and to the right for what feels like eternity. Most recently, we saw this happen in October 2020 right here when Bitcoin was trading at 13,000 and change. And of course, there was literally no downside from that point. It was just straight up until about the cycle high. So that can happen, but I would suggest that that is a lot less likely to happen in the instance where you are already on new cycle highs, which is what we have as of right now. In the cases where we have seen this quote unquote fail, meaning that price action genuinely did not see that level ever again and just traded to the upside, Bitcoin was trading below the prior cycle's cycle high. So in this case, you can see the cycle high right here. This one obviously happened right here, a little bit below that prior cycle high. And yes, that one did not operate as you would typically expect these things to. But more often than not, yeah, when you do get that capitulation signal, it's a cause for caution. It's a cause for long-term investors to say, hey, I don't really want to be buying up here. Trading, if you're short-term timeframes, yeah, you can trade around things, at all hours of the day. It's possible, yes. But I'm specifically speaking to the more long-term investors right now of this channel, which I am actually starting to become a little bit more of myself. Anyways, what I'd like to say about this is that on this daily and 5-day time frame, I will be, and you're going to hear me take on a much more risk averse tone here as we now have this capitulation signal set in stone until we get the next blue buy signal, at which point perhaps we have another one of these similar moves that we saw from the April lows to the current highs. Anyways, moving on from there, this signal is not, in what am I looking for? In isolation, yes. It is combined with several other technical indicator signals that we have been waiting for on this channel as well. They've been forming in the background, but not necessarily confirmed just yet. And as soon as tonight, we might see almost all of these confirmed. So I'll start off over here on the daily time frame, and we can see that daily time frame does have the potential for some pretty significant, actually, bearish divergence on the daily RSI, losing the bullish control zone here as well, by the way. And of course, it's not confirmed just yet. We got 16 hours left to go in the day, so a lot of things can happen. And I would really say that pretty much all price action before the U.S. markets open is more or less irrelevant, honestly. But if Bitcoin does close anywhere below yesterday's low, anywhere below at all of yesterday's low at 103,100 on a daily time frame, that will confirm bearish divergence here on the daily time frame. Also, my crown oscillator with the dots of death is turning down as well, and that would confirm the bearish divergence on not just the daily time frame, but also, actually, sorry, the 2-day time frame does not close today; it closes tomorrow. But the 2-day time frame will also have the potential for bearish divergence pending tomorrow night's closure. So you can see how the daily would then influence the 2-day time frame and spill in over there as it does lose lose, or would presumably lose, the bullish control zone as well. And that can then spill into the 3-day time frame, which is making massive divergence from the current all-time high of Bitcoin. And you can see that price actually did close on a new high for last night's closure. And so that means that all points going back on over here would be connected with that bearish divergence. So again, it is, it would be a signal for a bit of a pause and some short-term sideways and downside price action. This, however, can also bleed into the weekly time frame. In fact, we were just talking on Twitter here, because we're live on Twitter right now. And who was it who brought this one up? Because I actually did not catch it myself, but just looking right now. Yes, it was Wazzy Boy on Twitter. I want to give him credit for pointing this one out, but the weekly time frame also has potential for regular bearish divergence as well. In fact, it would be 3 drives from the highs of March of last year, connected with the highs of December of this past year as well, and even the highs in January. And you can see right here in May, with Bitcoin closing actually the highest closure ever on the weekly, there would be a significantly lower high on the weekly RSI, thus completing significant drives of bearish divergence. But again, this is not going to happen, or I mean, I shouldn't say that it's not going to happen soon. I don't know if and when it's going to happen, but I can tell you when it would be confirmed. If and when Bitcoin does trade below last week's low and preferably close a weekly dildo below there, yeah, then you got that confirmed and you have a real reversal here. Now, we'll talk about downside targets in a moment. I'm not suggesting that this is like full-on mega macro bearish cycle over just yet. I still have my own opinion on the cycle timing. That is, somewhere between like middle of July to end of September, which is subject to change. Of course, I could be massively wrong in this, but we're doing things like really, really, really far out here. But as it stands right now, if Bitcoin were to trade below last week's low and especially close below there, you're not just going to confirm weekly bearish divergence. You're also going to confirm the monthly stochastic oscillator continuing to the downside and losing a significant area, which is the bullish critical zone, which I'll show in just a moment after it loads. There we go. Yeah, so you can see the pivot is just above $100,000. So that would then bleed on into an even higher term time frame, which I do think would be a little bit more concerning. But while we are here, I should also acknowledge that all of the other higher term timeframes for Bitcoin from a stochastic momentum perspective are still continuing down as well. Daily time frame has multiple drives of bearish divergence, plus it will be downside angled as long as Bitcoin is closing daily dildos below 105 and change, probably likely for today. 2-day time frame, we can see that. Let me load it first, perhaps. The 2-day time frame is also going to be turning down as well, but it would be nice to actually load it and confirm. Yes, indeed, it's coming down from a very, very high level, by the way. Some of the highest levels that we've seen in multiple years. That one's pivoted at almost 107,000 US dollars, so nearly the high of yesterday. The 3-day time frame is also going to be coming down. Again, give it a little bit of time to load here, but I can assure you it is currently pointed to the downside. If we can get it, there we go. And will be continuing down, assuming the next closure is below 105,600. And then, of course, that can bleed into the 5-day time frame, which is probably not going to happen on the next closure, but it will become perhaps more relevant as we come into the next open. So this one has another day to go. So tomorrow night, this one will get a new period. And as of right now, you can see the 5-day stochastic oscillator is deep inside that critical territory. And as of right now, the current momentum pivot is actually 96,700 or so. So I imagine that this momentum pivot should shift up decently as well when we get that new open from tomorrow night. But we won't know actually until that officially does happen. But then you could imagine that the daily, 2-day, 3-day, and 5-day all working in confluence with each other, plus the potential for confirmation of bearish divergence all the way up to a weekly pending this week's closure. That does start to really look like Bitcoin's going to enter into a pretty decent corrective phase here. Now let's put things into perspective for a moment, because Bitcoin has been straight up for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, which is actually the most consecutive green weeks we've seen since October of 2023. We saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So close to there. And if we go back further in time, you can see that that's actually like about a consistent number for consecutive green weeks. So if Bitcoin does pull back from here, I'm not suggesting that this is the end of the world or anything like that. Bitcoin can afford a major pullback here, because if you look on the weekly time frame, the last low was the April lows, and ever since then, it's just been straight fucking up. So if Bitcoin pulls back, first things first, have to be looking for a higher low. But because this has been such an aggressive move, an over 40% move to the upside, Bitcoin come all the way down to low 90s, and that would just be considered a higher low. So I do think that this next phase is going to be a bit of a pullback from these highs. It's probably going to take, a little bit of time here. It's not going to happen all in one day, or probably not even all in 1 week or two, or the next 2 weeks, but certainly over the next month, I would imagine. And just keep that in mind. The trend is your friend still. And of course, if it makes, a higher low, I mean, that's going to look really fucking good. Like if I'm drawing out the bullish scenario here, it probably looks something like this. Well, I guess I just gave it away, but it doesn't necessarily need to come all the way down this low. But my point is that it can come down significantly, set in a higher low, and that actually starts to look really fucking good as this being a powerful consolidation leading towards, a major upside resolution, probably prolongs the market cycle, probably even exaggerates some of the upside targets as well. And also historically, it kind of makes sense to me as well, just because throughout this cycle, in comparison to other cycles especially, Bitcoin has spent a significant amount more time consolidating these moves. Of course, last year, everyone knows Bitcoin spent like 8 fucking months going sideways here. And before that, it spent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months going sideways. We've never seen that in a cycle before after breaking all-time highs, or even really in many cases before that. A lot of people like to make comparisons between this cycle and 2017, for example. I don't fucking see it. You can very clearly see once Bitcoin broke all-time highs in 2017, you didn't get much more than, a few weeks of correction. Whereas this current cycle, we saw 8 fucking months. I mean, that is it's a change of behavior. That's why I do believe Bitcoin is starting to change into more of an ETF, acting more like an ETF in terms of the way that it moves, in the way that price moves. So yeah, anyways, let me get back onto my notes. I probably just went on a massive, unnecessary tirade right there. I apologize. Let's go over some price action pivots here. These ones always keep us honest, and we can see the daily time frame is showing the current pivot at 100,800, basically the low of last Monday. This is also going to be more or less synonymous with that yellow 21 EMA on the daily, which is just a very obvious target based off of that potential daily bearish divergence. So if that does happen, I'll be looking for another move basically to about $100,000. Of course, targets can emerge further south from there. As we identified on the higher term timeframes, there is significant potential to have these signals bleed on into, higher timeframes than the ones that we're currently looking at right now, which would very likely govern lower targets. But that brings up the topic. Well, if Bitcoin does fail below this pivot, which I think actually is probably likely, to be honest, where would the next target be? Well, if you're looking at moving averages, that green 55 EMA, which is creeping up almost to about $95,000, would be the next area of interest. Anywhere between there and the 200 simple, so that'd give us a range between 95 and like 93 or so. Depending upon how long it takes to come down around there. And then of course the other one, and probably what I'd actually put a lot more weight on, is my most prized indicator here, the HPDR on the 5-day time frame. And we can see that we have one of those setups where volatility is entering into a contraction phase. And when volatility enters into a contraction phase after hitting what is more or less an extreme level here, it almost got to 90 percentile, which is the highest level that we've seen in many, about half a year, we should be looking for at least a move somewhere down around the median. Now, the median is going to shift like massively with each and every open and closure. So this one will update again tomorrow night on the daily closure. And as of right now, the median, which my cursor is currently on, is about $88,000. I imagine it will move up to, 93, 94. And then of course, a closure after that, it should move up probably again as well. So we'll see if and when price action does approach that region. But if when it does approach that region, that would be my first sort of major area of, hey, I'm happy to potentially buy some for more of a long-term position here, depending upon how other things work as well. But, I'm not really looking for this to be resolved until we see that volatility come back down and also price action get closer to that median. Again, I don't think it's going to happen, all the way down here just yet, but ultimately my thoughts on that don't really actually matter. What matters is what price action does. So when we do see that interplay happen, assuming that it does happen, which very likely will, I mean, this almost always does work like that, then, we have essentially a sort of model of how to interpret that, which would be, hey, this is the first area that I'd really be looking for on, potential for a major low, maybe even the next major low before new all-time highs, something like this. Anyways, I think that's a good place maybe leaving off. I didn't go over invalidation conditions for this because it's honestly not going to be that helpful. What I'm going to tell you, price action pivot is going to obviously mark off last night's high as the as the pivot, but that's why it's a potential reversal. As long as you're below there, and I know this isn't that helpful, but as long as you're below there, downside is going to be a little more likely here, at least statistically speaking. So short term, like I said, I don't think that there's going to be any like significant moves between now and the open of US markets. Probably at least a bounce, I'd imagine, which you're kind of getting right now. But other than that, there's, I think it's gonna be a lot of waiting around. Once you get US markets opening up, that's when the real game begins. And even then, I mean, probably have seen the majority of the downside for today, I would guess. If we are going to see further continuation, it probably happens tomorrow throughout the rest of this week. Would just like to see this bearish divergence confirmed first. If that happens, okay, yeah, we got a pretty strong signal. But yeah, anyways, that's where I'm going to leave off on this particular video. Should we go check in on... Nah, we don't need to check on anything else today. I want to make this one nice and short and sweet. As always, you can try out all of these tools, Caretaker's full indicator suite with the RSI, with my favorite HPDR over here. You can even get the Quant Prime service. You can even get the Quantum Wave Bands. You can even get the price action pivots. You can try it out all for free for 7 days. You don't even need a fucking code anymore. You just go on to the Teachable link in the description below, and you can put them up on your charts as soon as you basically sign up, and you can start following along if you so desire. Or you could also even stay on with them as well if you really do love them, which I quite love them myself. Anyways, I'm gonna be signing off on that note. As always, wish you the best. Tomorrow we'll come back with another live stream analysis, and hopefully we have the next puzzle piece in place after that. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully Tuesday.